The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia is now in session. L'audience du Tribunal Pénal International pour l'ex-Yougoslavie est ouverte. Please be seated.
Moment, just get us ready. Yes, I'm going to start with Mr. Nice. Mr. Nice, is there anything which you need to address us on immediately before the accused raises some point?
Several points. I have several points to raise, to deal with, matters that would typically, I think, be dealt with in a private session, even in a fully public session. They're procedural, they deal with disclosure to the accused, matters of that sort.
Well,
I'm happy to do them now or after the accused has made his point.
We need to deal anyway with a number of administrative matters, but we'll start with the accused, since we're in open session. Yes.
Mr. May, at the end of last week, when there were no hearings, I received a decision from the registry in which I'm prohibited of having any communication by telephone or any visits, and I don't understand why this came about. Are you informed of this? And I consider this to be in gross violation of human rights, and I would request that the matter be addressed.
It's not a matter we'll deal with at the moment. We will look to see what the point is, and if necessary, we'll come back to it in due course. For the moment, we'll deal with those matters which are concerned with this particular issue. Yes. You want to go into private session, Mr.
Please.
Okay.
Two or three matters potentially which we have to address at this stage. The first is the extent, if any, it is appropriate with this important witness to have any evidence given under Rule 89F. He dealing with the accused very substantially on conversations, some of which have been in dispute, in some cases heavily in dispute. And it would therefore seem to us to be appropriate that those matters should be dealt with in open session. We are concerned at the evidence which it is proposed to be given about the conflict. I'm referring to the end of the statement, and the amount of resultant cross-examination, which there must be in fairness if the evidence is given. And finally, we have to deal with the admissibility of the book as a whole. General Clark, I'm sorry you've been brought in. There's a misunderstanding. But it doesn't matter because we're going to have a debate about the extent of your evidence and how much we're going to admit. And unless anybody objects, it seems to me if you don't mind sitting listening, it may be no harm is done.
I have no objection, Your Honor.
Well, as to the second of the points that the court expressed as being a matter of concern, could the court possibly identify the particular passages which you say are concerning because of the degree to which they would open up cross-examination? There's 44...
Let us deal with it in order. First of all, the question of live evidence.
Yes.
I can tell you we have in mind that the witness's evidence should be given in live.
Very well. It's a matter entirely for the court. As you know, when we first instituted 89F statements, we said we would apply comprehensively in order not to take any advantage by selecting that which would be given live. We're entirely in the court's hands. For our part, there are both exchanges where the previous witness, Klaus Naumann, was present, which might have fallen for different consideration, and there are passages where the accused is not present, but other named persons are. It had occurred to us that those might have been stronger candidates for 89F, but we don't say any more than that.
Well, next, the book. We've had a chance of reading those passages on which you rely. And they amount to some 10%, if that, of the total pages in the book. 40-odd pages against 400-odd.
Yes.
And having read the statement, it seems to us broadly that they cover the same material in the most important parts, and the others I should have thought were not of such significance that they should be admitted. But in any event, there is the question of principle, which is how right it is for a small part of a book to allow the admission of the whole, which of course deals with much broader matters. And we are therefore minded not to admit the book.
Your Honour, we are of course in the court's hands, and it may be something that falls for better consideration at the end rather than the beginning of the evidence and cross-examination. We provided you with only a limited number of pages in order, we hope, to help and to save the chamber from the burden of having to go through the totality of the book. We've considered the admission of the book against the rulings that have been made under Rule 70, because of course those follow on an application for limitation of evidence made by us as part of the necessary Rule 70 agreements and requirements. And there is an argument that examination, or certainly cross-examination, outside the identified pages would be in contravention of the ruling of the chamber. We considered that yesterday with both the witness, his lawyers, but more importantly perhaps the United States government lawyers, and I think that the view taken was that a practical approach might be to say that could the whole book be admitted, and the witness would be happy to answer questions on anything within its ambit. But if the court is at first sight and at this stage inclined towards the view that less rather than more is appropriate, we, I think, are happy to go along with that and await the position at the end of the cross-examination.
Well, that's the course that we will follow.
And then finally, Your Honour said that there were particular passages of the statement that might have led to broader cross-examination or more extensive cross-examination than could be allowed for in the time available for this witness. I'm not sure exactly which paragraphs the court had in mind, because we could consider them and see to what extent we really wish them to go in.
But you may wish to consider paragraphs 39 onwards, which deal entirely with the conflict. Now, it's a matter for you what course you want to take, but the issue is, if such evidence is given, what cross-examination it opens up in fairness to the trial as a whole.
Your Honour, may, on the assumption that we go beyond the first break. May I come back to that immediately after the first break?
Yes. And I suppose the final issue is timing. How long do you anticipate you might be?
I wouldn't have thought that my examination of the witness will last very much more than one session, one ordinary 1.5-hour session. The statement is compact, and the witness knows his material, I think.
And the witness has made himself available, as we have in our order stated, for 2 days. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. I haven't actually technically asked him when his return flight is. My oversight. But
well, no doubt that can be done. Mr. Kay, can you assist us with your, if you or Mr. Buskovich intend to ask any questions?
Your Honour, the matters so far in relation to the book, in my view, it'd be probably the position that we can take stock at the end of the evidence to see where we are. We've often made decisions at the start and ended up changing them by the finish of testimony. In terms of time for cross-examination, the amici would request half an hour.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Milosevic.
I don't quite understand the position of this witness, since my understanding was that he would be testifying in closed session and that you described that as a temporarily closed session, and then in the meantime representatives of the government of his country may be able to review the transcript, to approve some of it, to redact some of it possibly, and only then to release it to the public. I'm not aware of any legal court in the world delegating its authority of this kind to any government. This would be the first time for any such thing to happen. Of course, you consider yourself to be a legal court.
We are not going to argue this point. We have made our order. The reason that the government have any rights in the matter at all is this: that in order to provide information to this court, it is occasionally, and I stress occasionally, necessary for governments to do so, and they are allowed to do so under our rules on certain terms, and these are one of the terms which have been followed in this case. Yes, Mr. Nice. Perhaps we should begin, and we will ask the General Clerk to take the declaration, if you would.
may I diffidently remind, Your Honour, that you were going to make some rulings. I didn't know if you intended to make them before the witness started his evidence. No, very well. My misunderstanding.
I think all the necessary rulings have been made.
Your Honors, I solemnly declare that I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. If you'd like to take a seat.
It's Wesley Clark, correct?
Yes, it is.
And General Clark, for you are indeed General. Your history is set out in a summary of your life, which is tab 2 of a bundle of exhibits. May that bundle be given a comprehensive exhibit number?
Yeah, there's an issue as to whether the tab 1 should be admitted, because we've not admitted it under Rule 89F. But what we'll do is we'll give the bundle a general number, and we can review the position at the end as to which tabs are admitted.
617, Your Honors.
May the witness at some stage have a bundle of exhibits, if that's convenient. General Clerk, without going through your personal history in detail, for it's a matter of public record, does it include that you graduated from West Point in 1966, that from 1994 to 1996 you served as Director for Strategic Plans and Policy for the Joint Chiefs of Staff with responsibilities for worldwide United States military strategic planning, that from 1996 to 1997 you served as Commander-in-Chief of the United States Southern Command, Panama, where you were responsible for the direction of United States military activities in Latin America and the Caribbean. And from 1997 through to May of 2000, you were NATO Supreme Allied Commander and Commander-in-Chief of the United States European Command. And in this position, you commanded the Operation Allied Force, which was NATO's first major combat action in the area of the former Yugoslavia.
This is correct.
General Clark, your first encounter with the accused, I think, was on the 17th of August of 1995, where you met him as one of a delegation that included Richard Holbrooke and the late Joseph Krusel and others, including Colonel Drew and Robert Fraser. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And was this part of shuttle negotiations for a Bosnian peace deal?
Yes, it was.
Can you give us a little of the setting? What was the topics? Who was running it? And so on?
Richard Holbrooke was the leader of the American delegation, and this was our first meeting with Serb President Slobodan Milosevic. We wanted to meet each of the leaders in the Balkans and present to them the general outline of what we believe to be a possible settlement that could be achieved, including a settlement achieved with the presence of some American troops as part of a NATO mission. And this was the first meeting with President Milosevic. We went to his office there in the capital of Belgrade.
Was one of the topics who should be representing the Bosnian Serbs in negotiating a peace plan? And if so, what was the accused's reaction to that?
Yes, this was the question because it had come up previously that some people were talking to Karadzic, and we wanted to raise this issue with Slobodan Milosevic. And so we asked him, should we be dealing with you or should we be dealing with the Bosnian Serbs? And then President Milosevic said, with me, of course. And as we continued the dialogue, we said, well, why? And the basic reason was that he could deliver the peace agreement. And this seemed improbable on the face of it. He was the president of a different country. And he said, no, give me the terms of the agreement. We'll have an election, a referendum on this agreement. And we said, well, why would a referendum in a different country bind the Bosnian Serbs? He said, they will not go against the will of the Serb people.
There came a time when you spoke to him with only one or perhaps a couple of people present, I think.
That's right.
Give the setting for that and then tell the court your recollection of precisely what was said?
Well, after we'd had this exchange, a break was taken, and Ambassador Holbrooke went up to visit the facilities outside. The meeting generally broke up. President Milosevic stayed there, and Assistant Secretary Krusel and I approached President Milosevic as he was standing there in casual setting outside the formal meeting. And I was still wrestling with the idea as to how it is that Milosevic could maintain that he had the authority and the power to deliver the Serb compliance with agreement. And so I simply asked him, I said, Mr. President, you say you have so much influence over the Bosnian Serbs, but how is it then, if you have such influence, that you allowed General Mladic to kill all those people in Srebrenica? And Milosevic looked at me, and he paused for a moment. He then said, well, General Clark, he said, I warned Mladic not to do this, but he didn't listen to me.
Your understanding of what he was referring to, if you have an understanding beyond the words themselves, can you give it to us? But
Certainly.
First of all, explain, if it does have a context and an understanding, how you arrive at that understanding.
Well, it was very clear what I was asking was about the massacre at Srebrenica. When I said, kill all these people, it wasn't a military operation, it was the massacre. And this is what, in fact, had been in the news. It had been the starting point for the international agreements, which led to NATO's increased resolve to see an end to the fighting in the Balkans. And so it was very clear what I was asking. It was also, to me, very clear what Milosevic was answering. He was answering that he did know this in advance, and he was walking the fine line between saying he was powerful enough, influential enough to have known it, but trying to excuse from himself the responsibility for having done it.
The next meeting, I think, was on the 13th of September, or a subsequent meeting was on the 13th of September at the accused's lodge near Belgrade. Paragraph 5 of the statement serving as a summary, Your Honours. Did you have a discussion with Milosevic on this occasion with expectations that he might be able to make some contact with Mladic and Karadzic?
Well, we had never expected, when we went to this meeting, that there would be a meeting with Mladic and Karadzic. This was a surprise. This was during the period of the bombing. May I just ask, I have a technical problem with this computer. Maybe this button was hit or something, and I don't know which button to turn it back on with. Thank you. We went there as part of the shuttle diplomacy, and the bombing was going on. President Milosevic had been saying this bombing was bad for peace. And we, of course, the bombing was part of the pressure to convince the Serbs to fall back and release the grip of terror on Sarajevo. And Milosevic asked the delegation, he said, would you be willing to meet with Karadzic and Mladic? And Ambassador Holbrooke called us aside. He said, what do you think? These men are now indicted war criminals. Should we meet with them in the interest of trying to stop and change the situation on the ground? And the delegation agreed with Holbrooke that we should do this. Holbrooke conveyed that information to Mr. Milosevic, and Mr. Milosevic said, well, they're here. You'll see them in just a couple of minutes. They're only a couple of 100 meters away. Yeah. We were surprised. We didn't know where they were.
Next topic. Did you form a view as to the VJ and Serb leadership receiving operational reports from the VRS? If so, what was the view and why?
Well, it was our view that the Serb military, that the VRS, was closely connected to the military of Yugoslavia, the VJ. We knew this from electronic evidence from reliable sources, and we even at one point went and told the Serb military that they had to turn off the air defense connectivity that linked the air defense system in Bosnia with that in Serbia. So there was a clear connection. we knew that the Serb military had been carved out of the Yugoslav military.
And when you asked Serb military to turn off the transmission, which particular Serb military leader did you address?
It was General Perisic.
At the Dayton negotiations, did you meet somebody called Jovica Stanisic?
Yes, I did.
What was he introduced to you as?
He was introduced to me as the head of the Serb intelligence service. He'd been rumored to be very, very influential, and some people were surprised that he was at the negotiations, but there he was, and we all met him.
The military annex drawn at the Dayton negotiations, did you deal with Krajnik and ask him to review a proposed military annex? If so, what happened and how was the problem resolved?
We did meet with the Bosnian Serb delegation. I did hand the military annex draft to Mr. Krajnik and ask him to consider this. I told him I'd like to have an answer back in the next day or two. This was early on in the negotiations. And subsequently, he did give me the paper back, and most of the annex was simply lined through. It had the effect of completely obviating the military annex. It would have put a military force into Bosnia that had no authorities.
How did you attempt to resolve it? How was it resolved as a problem?
President Milosevic had previously said that if there were any difficulties, to please consult with him. I arranged to see President Milosevic, said that the Bosnian Serbs had rejected this military annex and asked for his help. He said, just give it to Milutinovic and he'll take care of it. And that's exactly what happened. A day or so later, I got it back from then Foreign Minister Milutinovic. He said, this is it. There were a couple of minor changes at the beginning of the document, but all those portions which had been excised by the Bosnian Serbs were restored. I thanked Milutinovic.
What did this reveal to you about where the decision-making power lay?
Well, it revealed to me that President Milosevic was fully in charge of the delegation.
During Dayton, was time spent going over military maps of various kinds, both physical and also computer?
Yes, we did spend a great deal of time on maps.
Was one of those maps a map that you brought from America, or had brought from America, that's on the easel beside you?
Yes, this is a military map that was used to discuss the boundaries around Sarajevo and whether Sarajevo would remain a divided city or not.
A copy of that map, Your Honour, is given the marking tab 5 of Exhibit 617. General Clark, can you, probably from where you are, but with the pointer that's available, explain to the court what the accused part was in dealing with this map?
This is the map that was used in the middle of the night discussion between President Milosevic and Bosnian Muslim Prime Minister Haris Seladic. And the discussion was, this is the city of Sarajevo. This is some of the high ground around Sarajevo. This was the discussion about which parts of the terrain would be given back to the Muslims. And as I recall the discussion in red here, Milosevic had this red marker and he scratched things out on it. And this was these were personal scrawlings of the leaders here.
It's a long time ago, but reminding yourself from the map, looking at for example, the vertical line closer to Sarajevo that's been crossed out,
Right.
and the line to the east.
Yeah, I think, as I recall, this is the line that President Milosevic drew in right here and crossed this one out.
And such a line would have achieved what for the Serb forces?
It would have been a give back to the Muslims around Sarajevo. It would have been an effort to resolve this quarrel about how much ground would be given back around Sarajevo. It would have been a concession.
To what degree did the accused in dealing with this map have personal knowledge? To what degree did he appear to need to speak to or seek assistance from others with more detailed knowledge?
He appeared to have a great deal of personal knowledge and seemed to have no need to speak with anyone else.
Even when drawing these lines?
Correct.
Next, the computer map. Did you work on a computer map with